Good.
Yeah, dude, I really wish that I could do one of these not hungover sometime.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm doing that right now, so it'd be cool if you could join me sometime.
Mm.
So, we're out here in Monaco, sitting in a really nice hotel overlooking the beach. We'll throw a picture up for you guys. Before we get right into it, we just want to have a couple church announcements for you. We have upgraded the production quality of this podcast. We went out today and got Chad a little bit of we went out and got little Chad a microphone of his own, and
Thanks, Big Jeff.
yeah, no problem.
So you should be able to hear me a little more clearly now.
Yeah. So what are we doing today?
Well, I almost didn't want to do this because I felt like it was a bit of an not outdated, but the main media kerfuffle has kind of subsided a little bit. But I did end up hearing it several times, at least on NPR recently, and that would be Black Lives Matter, or BLM, and kind of just the whole race narrative behind mainly law enforcement tactics, police shootings, police brutality, incarceration. And I feel like these things kind of flare up from time to time, but I don't feel like they have ever completely subsided. So it seemed a fair enough topic to discuss this week.
Yeah, I think anytime you try to talk about one of these, I guess, special interest groups, you're staring in the eyes of death in some way. But not to say that Black Lives Matter doesn't have a legitimate argument. I think they definitely have points in what they're trying to say that are extremely necessary to view in depth. And of course, anytime somebody gets shot by the police, it's a real tragedy because it's an unnecessary death. I mean, not anytime. Sometimes they're asking for it.
We'll get into that. But,
so, if they're shooting back, they definitely deserve it. But
yeah.
If they're sitting in their car with their daughter and they get, telling the cop, which I know we're going to go into, but, just to set the stage, telling the cop they have a gun and the cop shoots them, that's pretty... there's really nothing else you can say is that is a completely unnecessary death. There was no reason for that to happen.
Right, sometimes. Just to back it up slightly, I will say, yes, there's some excellent points being made, and I'm a little weary at any point of saying, yeah, I want to tackle the movement called Black Lives Matter.
I don't think
just seems so of course they do. Of course they do. And it sounds almost just so trite and cliche to come back and say all lives matter or blue lives do or whatever. And it's not that I don't think that black lives don't matter or that any lives don't matter, and I don't want to come back with that. The main point that I'm trying to make is that they are presenting the facts behind the argument, which is essentially trying to incite some kind of race-based narrative and movement on facts that are sometimes false, blatantly, or sometimes just somewhat misleading, or and just the way that it comes across. It's also tough to tackle this movement because it's not a particularly defined one. I mean, it's like SJWs in that regard, where you kind of have to take each one on a case-by-case basis. You can kind of say the movement has certain goals. I mean, there is a Black Lives Matter website, but that was the work of a few people, not some kind of actual real organization behind this kind of stuff. So
yeah, it's not it's not like a clearly defined entity like maybe with what you saw in the civil rights movement, where you had a couple of leaders and the original civil rights movements. I mean,
right, there was clear figureheads.
Yeah.
Behind those, I mean, at the time, not even just that emerged later is wow, that person was particularly successful, but
although there is one, to my understanding, I can't remember the name. There was one, I guess, what you would call role model that they kind of set their movement up based around this person, and she had to flee the country for murder.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There was some black
and some terrorist. I think she might have been accused of some terrorist thing.
I'm not actually super well versed on that. I think Jordan Peterson talked about it.
He did,
though. Yeah, just kind of. But even that's, I didn't feel like that was a particularly strong point for him to make, because it's yeah, I mean, you can have an organization that got kicked off or was inspired by, or even directly founded by somebody who had some bad shit on the side. I mean, it's a criticism people like to make of It was Martin Luther King who did. I think wasn't he the one who cheated on his wife.
Yeah, Martin Luther King.
And it's like, okay, he can do that, and it doesn't necessarily definitely doesn't actually invalidate any of the points that he was making about.
Yeah, he's just a human. Like,
yeah,
we all have our flaws.
So I mean, pointing and saying, well, the person that your movement was founded around. I mean, that was his whole thing. He didn't want them advising the school board or whatever because he was able to note a couple of unsavory characters who had something to do with kicking the movement off. And it's like, well, but if the points are valid, the points are valid. You can't look at that person and say, well, they embezzled funds from this, that, and the other thing, therefore their points about a race narrative are incorrect. You have to take those points at face value.
Yeah. I might be wrong. I don't think the way Black Lives Matter set up their, again, this role model I can't remember the name of, which really sucks, but I don't think she ever made a point. She wasn't really involved with the movement.
I think in that case she inspired it.
She inspired it, but what were they inspired from her? Were they inspired by her actions, which were pretty
fair.
Yeah, or were they inspired by what she said? If it was what she said, it's totally valid. If it was what she did, maybe that's a little questionable.
Okay, that's a good point. I don't feel like either of us are well.
Yeah, we're not really well versed to get into the history of it, but just to provide some context of, well, fuck, nobody really needs context on this anymore. We all kind of know what it is.
So the Black Lives Matter movement kicked off mainly in response to what were mainly reported to be unjustified police shootings of black people, police shootings of black people in disproportionate numbers. Mm-hmm. And they kind of bandy about some statistics. That was what I mentioned. And one of the big ones is that black people get shot at rates 3 times higher than white people. Now, I actually went and did the math, and I won't bore you with all the figures, but you're more than welcome to do it yourself. And while it's true that black people do get shot at a rate 300% of what white people get shot, I went and looked at the statistical likelihood of getting shot, and the numbers are measured in the billionths of a percent. So billionths of a percent, like statistical chance of getting shot. So the I mean, while you might wonder why they're not exactly even, it does seem a little ridiculous to be kicking off this movement, which has, quite frankly, sometimes gotten violent and rioted and this, that, and the other thing, when you're talking about a disparity that's actually measured in billions of a percent. So
and that's billions of a percent for black people, not for white people. Is that right?
I don't want to count out all the zeros. I don't have those in front of me, but basically, like, the chance of getting shot by police if you're a white guy is 1 billionth of a percent, and the chance of getting shot if you're a black dude is 3 billionths of a percent.
Okay, gotcha.
So, I mean, but like the way that that's kind of framed is as like 3 times more likely, 300% more likely, when you're actually talking about a difference of 0.000.
Yeah, would they be more even if you took population disparity into account, perhaps?
What do you mean? No, that's proportionate. So like I'm looking at, like if you look at the total number of black people in the United States and make that, I mean it's the statistical percentage chance. It's not. It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that there's more white people and less black people. That's what I'm trying to say. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, pretty much.
If I count for the fact that black people are a minority.
Right, yeah. There's less.
No, that doesn't factor into the figures that I just listed at all. It doesn't factor into the 3 times figure either, and it's population differences are accounted for there.
Okay. Well, I think the concern is where it's going, not really what started, because I think 2012, I think, or no, earlier, 2010. It seemed like there was a lot of unnecessary death, and the one that immediately comes to mind was the guy in New York City who was selling loose cigarettes on the street corner, and they killed him with a stranglehold.
Right.
That's the first one that I can think of that I really was like, I mean, not the first one that I heard about, but the first one where that was so unnecessary, because seemingly everything was out about it. We knew everything about the case. The video was there, and you saw a guy selling cigarettes, which, okay, that's illegal in New York City. Right. In New York, it's illegal to sell loose cigarettes. It's not illegal in the South for some reason. But
plantations, man.
You know, is that even a fine?
I'm sure it's a fine.
You're right, but why? Like,
okay, but here's the thing that kind of comes off as misleading is, from what I remember about that case, there was some element of him being somewhat belligerent and resisting arrest.
Okay, but
well, that doesn't make the stranglehold appropriate. The way that it's framed, that cops saw the guy selling loose cigarettes, so they just came up and choked him to death.
Right.
Is not necessarily...
Probably not the way it went down.
It's not the way that it went down.
And from the video, it's not the way it went down.
No, he was being a little belligerent. And there was another recent one, actually.
Belligerent, I think, at least the video that I saw, was him just kind of being like, just what? Just, I'm not doing anything. Because he wasn't, my understanding, and I could be wrong, but my understanding was he wasn't actually doing it at the time.
Dude, I'm really more...
So if you're standing on a street corner and they're trying to arrest you and you're doing nothing...
Okay. Well, okay, so I'm more well-versed in the more recent cases.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I would kind of prefer to take them in that order. But another good example of something where it's not as clear-cut as people like to make it out to be was that there was a guy who was recently shot during a routine traffic stop for a broken taillight.
Right.
And the way that it's presented is, the cops are shooting black people for having broken taillights now.
Okay.
It wasn't the way that it went down.
Right.
He actually told the officer... They just recently released the audio and footage of this, and I listened to it. And he tells the cop, "I have a gun in the car."
Yeah.
And the cop says, "Okay, well, thanks for telling me. Don't reach for it." And then the guy starts reaching for what the defense argued was his registration.
Right.
Apparently kept in the same area, but you heard the cop say probably 10 times, "Don't reach for it.
No,
Stop. Don't reach for it.
I don't think
Don't
it was
reach
10
for it.
times.
Don't reach for it." What?
It wasn't 10 times.
Okay.
I watched it a bunch of times, and
he said it multiple times.
Point
is, guy kept reaching for something while you had a police officer.
He didn't really have time to stop. That was the thing. When I watched the video, and definitely bring it up on your phone if there's a little audio from there, it's no big deal. But and tell me if I'm wrong. Like if you do watch the video, when I watched it, it was, broken tail light. Okay, give me your ID, right? And then I have a gun in the car. Okay. He starts reaching for his ID, which he was asked to do. The cop says, "Don't reach for your gun," or don't reach for it is what he actually said.
Yeah, well, don't reach.
And then before the guy could actually respond, the cop jumped back from the window and shot like 6 times.
Yeah, the number of shots.
Yeah.
Sometimes in some of these cases.
Now here's the thing.
Concerning.
If you shoot a guy before you, hey, look, being a cop's a hard job, and the thing is, when you take into account of what they see on a daily basis and what they deal with, well, I think more to the point, what they deal with,
how jumpy
they become very jumpy.
Yeah.
So whether it was, I think the racism thing will say, I don't know if it was about race. I don't think it was. I think he was a jumpy, untrained cop, and we'll go into like the race, like why I don't think it's about race later. But I think we had there was a cop saying that they only have to go to the gun range once a year and shoot a 60%, or 70% shots on target rate. Yeah. So these cops are untrained, and that's the real thing. I think if you want to solve this problem, you have to have cops with confidence on the street, not cops that are untrained and undermanned. Right. And too many cops is definitely a thing, but I think it's just a confidence problem. I think the guy was unprofessional, got jumpy, and somebody died, and they definitely shouldn't have died. And the other thing too is, how many people are going to tell you they have a gun in the car if they mean to pull it on you? I don't think there's going to be a whole lot. There might be a couple, but not many.
Well, that's a fair point. The police definitely do need more training in this kind of stuff.
So do you think if it was a white guy, though, do you think that would have played out differently? If they were to say, or let's say you were to be sitting in the car and say, I have a gun in the car, I'm also going to get my ID. Do you think that would be played out differently?
So actually, not thinking about my race at all, but in the times that I have been pulled over, When I do get pulled over, if it's dark outside, I immediately turn on my interior lights.
Okay.
So the cop can see everything. It's well illuminated. And I keep my both hands on the steering wheel, up top. So it's not even like low or anything, just up top, nice and visible. And even if the cop says, can I see your license and registration, I tell him, okay, I'm going to reach into my back right pocket and pull out my registration, or pull out my ID. I'm going to reach into my glove box and pull out my registration. And then pause for a second, and then do those things fairly, not slowly, but deliberately, not jumpy, not, I mean, normally if I'm trying to get something from my glove box, I just pop over and pull it out real quick, but it's a much, more gradual kind of movement and smooth, accounting for those kind of things. And I mean, I'll maybe we can actually get the video in when you edit this stuff, because I was just taking a look.
Yeah, I'll definitely throw the video in.
It seems to be like 10 minutes, and I'm not really trying to scroll through that.
Yeah, for sure. I'll throw the video up, and we can.
I'm interested to see how correct I am. But from what I remember of it, he said, don't reach for it multiple times.
Right.
That implies that the guy's still in a state of motion. And I will agree, cops. I've had cops tell me. I've actually been at gunpoint by a police officer before when I was caught up in the park. They were looking for somebody else, and it was just me and my high school buddies drinking. But they occasionally issue contradictory directives, like freeze and get on the ground.
Right.
But they'll say that or be two different cops saying that, or cops saying, get on the ground, freeze, don't move, and it's like, what do you want me to do? And in that kind of situation, I feel like freeze is probably the best kind of option. I mean, if he asks for your ID,
right,
and then tells you not to reach for a gun,
yeah,
you probably shouldn't still keep moving. And granted, all this stuff is happening really fast, so you can't necessarily fault the guy who got shot for following a previous directive. But, my point is that it's not so simple that a cop pulled a guy over for broken taillight, walked up to the driver's side window, said, "Oh, it's a black guy with a broken taillight," and popped off 6 shots to his chest.
Yeah, it's not that simple.
My main point is that it's not that simple.
Yeah. I think that's the visceral reaction, when you see that, and I was certainly guilty of that, where it's like this guy, like
all he had was a broken taillight. How did he possibly get killed over that?
Yeah. Right. Like, I've never been killed over a broken taillight.
No.
A cop was wondering if I was drunk when I got my new car.
Everyone's been.
Yeah, one of my first cars. Yeah.
Has everyone not been fucked with by police?
Everybody's been fucked with by police, but but that, like I'm saying, that's the visceral reaction. Like you recount what you experienced, and you go, well, that wasn't what I experienced. My experience wasn't getting shot by a cop.
This is actually a great segue into why we need to get the facts and
yes,
and figure out what happened before reacting on it. And one of the reasons that I fault BLM, as amorphous a movement though it may be, that they have gone so far as to host and stage riots and flip over cars and burn down businesses when the police shooting has been perfectly justified, because they heard that a cop shot a black person, and that's all the info that they need. The most classic example I can think of this would be Michael Brown, where the dude literally on camera came in, strong-armed a convenience store owner for I think it was cigarillos, right? Just trying to steal some wraps for whatever.
Yeah.
I hope he was trying to roll blunts with them, because God, those things are awful to smoke.
Yeah, they're not very good.
No, I met somebody recently who actually smokes them, and I'm just like, dude, what the fuck?
Well, for sure, like,
there's
if you
real
went
cigars and there's cigarettes, but those are they just have tobacco in them, so there's some plausible deniability that you're not actually just buying them for weed. That's the only reason.
For sure that if he went for the flavored Swisher Sweets, he was definitely rolling blunts. I don't know if that's what he was reaching for, but
I met this guy recently who smokes flavored Swishers.
Ew.
Like, he'll just smoke it. Have you ever seen the tobacco rolled out on one of those?
Yeah,
it looks like plastic.
It looks worse than cigarette tobacco.
It looks like a bunch of... No, that actually looks like shredded dried leaves.
Yeah. And some of that's reclaimed fucking tobacco.
Yeah. No, it is just digressing a little bit. But anyway, so he came in, he's strong-armed. He robbed a convenience store. He assaulted the guy in the convenience store. Committed a crime. Cops tracked him down.
And then reached for the cop's gun, I believe.
Then assaulted the police officer. Tried to take the police officer's gun. Shot went off during this whole process.
So we're gonna power through this, but there's a guy power washing the beautiful serene streets of Monaco.
Hey man, you gotta keep the property clean, man.
You know, that's why we spend all the money to come here. You know,
It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
He's just a blue collar dude doing his job. So we're gonna get through with this podcast. Continue, Chad.
Anyways, yeah. So assaulted police officer, assaulted a guy, robbed a store, resisted arrest, tried to take a police officer's gun. I'm assuming not just to keep it as a trophy. Why are you trying to take a police officer's gun?
Well, at that point, it wouldn't matter what your intent was. You're
Right.
reaching for a gun.
Okay,
the only
but
thing
you
you can
say
think
that
of.
he was fully prepared to shoot a cop. That
I
doesn't seem like an unreasonable expectation if he's trying to steal a gun from a police officer.
As a
Maybe
gun-
he just book it after.
As a gun owner, even if I'm at the shooting range, if somebody walks up and tries to take my gun without like asking me about it first,
That's
I'm
trouble.
gonna assume that
trying
they're
to
gonna
do
shoot me.
something
Yeah.
bad. Yeah. So he does all this. He runs. There was one witness who was trying to say that he got gunned down and as he was trying to run away in the back. The forensic evidence and most of the eyewitness evidence corroborate the fact that he was actually running back towards the police officer at the time when the cop finally did end up shooting him. There was some, they shot him way too many times. It was also evidence that there was, that most of those shots were needed, that he didn't actually go down until the final shot was fired.
Yeah. Well, there was also the hands up, don't shoot thing, which was never...
Right, but that's exactly it. So then it spawns this whole movement, and I think it ended up being like a week plus of riots in Ferguson and demonstrations and protests nationwide, centered around BLM, and this whole slogan of hands up, don't shoot, which was something that never happened, and the police shooting was perfectly justified. Yeah. The guy committed, in the space of like 15 minutes, he committed multiple crimes, and some of them up to felony level crimes, including quite possibly trying to murder a police officer.
Yeah.
And he got shot for it. And,
well, I think that's
I don't
easy...
think if you look at the facts there, what the fuck was the cop supposed to do? At what point you got a guy who's already tried to kill you, who's already bashed your face in, who's now running towards you after you've given him ample opportunity to stand the fuck down.
Yeah.
What would you do in that situation? You got a guy. You gonna let him take your gun? You're gonna just let him rush you and not?
Well, just imagine like if you were to walk up to a cop without doing any other previous crime and try to grab his gun, there's a good chance you're not walking out of that. And that's for anybody.
Right.
Yeah, that one's a real easy one to kind of debunk. And yeah, the thing with BLM was they were just like, hands up, don't shoot, which was just so much of the opposite of what happened.
Yeah.
But it's still believed today
that Michael Brown
was a peaceful guy.
Well, and here's the other hilarious thing that comes up, is that they constantly bandy about the whole unarmed black men were shot. And Michael Brown was an unarmed black man who got shot.
Well, he was trying to be armed.
Not for lack of trying,
yeah.
Right? And clearly demonstrated that his fists were plenty dangerous enough. You can be dangerous with all kinds of things. I mean, other things other than a gun.
I believe he had previous assaults on record too, or I'm not totally sure about that, but it came out that he wasn't the gentle giant that he was made out to be.
Yeah, that's the other hilarious thing is you gotta love how every time that shit like this happens, you gotta find some like picture of them from like 7th grade when they're smiling for the yearbook camera, wearing a sweater, and then you go onto their Facebook page and it's pictures of them and throwing up fucking gang signs and posing with guns and the narrative around this kind of thing was hilarious. I mean, I think I could look up the specs on just how big Michael Brown actually was, but
he was a big guy,
large dude, and you didn't see that represented by BLM. It was this poor innocent black boy was shot, and he was not innocent, and and again, I don't know what you're supposed to do in that situation, but for BLM, all the motivation they need to riot was to hear that a black guy got shot by a cop.
Right.
Regardless of the circumstance.
It's and the other really disturbing thing is how you can't talk about it. Like BLM, we're raising awareness for these, and for innocent victims being shot. Okay, let's talk about those innocent victims. No. You can't talk about these innocent victims. You will believe what we told you to believe, and you will be behind us or you'll be against us. There's no... actual discussion. And the only way you can really kind of get by these things and fix them is to see what the actual problem was. And maybe the actual problem is very obvious, and maybe that problem very much is cops like to shoot black people. Maybe that's the problem. But if we don't hash out all the details of every shooting, we'll never figure that out for sure.
Yeah, I could almost guarantee that you and I would both be called racist by a large number of people just for having that discussion.
Yeah,
we just did right now.
Which we're doing. So
which we are, right? Yeah. But I mean, like, if you were to, I mean, just in your regular social circles, if you were to just want to talk about something like that. I mean, hopefully not unprompted. Just stroll into work and go, Michael Brown was actually guilty as I mean, you'll start these things unprompted, but like if they come up, like I've kind of mentioned stuff like this to people before and had this like incredible visceral reaction that somehow I'm just being racist because I'm trying to look at what actually happened,
right? As
opposed to just accepting this narrative that.
Well, it's the same reason why I think we both left religion, as they just said you have to believe this.
Yeah,
then like, well, no, it's not how my brain works.
Not being very receptive of criticism.
Yeah. And if they had
examination.
Yeah, well, I don't think we're criticizing.
Even before the point that we get to criticizing.
Yeah, just examining what actually happened, and maybe their story does hold up, maybe it doesn't, but let's actually look at it. Mm-hmm. That's just kind of the way the world operates.
Should.
Well, I think it does in the large part, but I think with BLM, there's a very big sense of, and any group thing, but I mean with BLM it's a real mob mentality kind of thing where it's the lowest IQ becomes the default of the group.
Right.
And that's with any group, but
oh yeah, definitely not exclusive to BLM. People get in groups, they get fucking stupid.
There is a thing with, you get that momentum going of just the momentum of fuck cops, fuck, this is, and it just keeps going and going, and you start tearing down people you maybe didn't mean to tear down. When I don't, like I said, we're not super well versed with the beginning of BLM. Maybe it was totally legitimate and.
Well, there have been times where cops have shot people who didn't deserve to be shot. I mean, I think that like the taillight incident. I mean, the courts found him innocent, but that's something where it's.
I don't understand that one.
It is arguably though up for debate. Like you and I seem to have different. Like we both have looked at the facts of the situation, and have come up on different conclusions. I don't think that anyone who's looked at the facts of Michael Brown can come up and say that he was.
Yeah, no. Anybody who actually looked at it, there's definitely no question. But yeah, how do you? That I think that is one of the good points Black Lives Matter brings up, and it's not necessarily just with black people. It's why do these cops get off on these heinous fucking crimes? When it is justified and it is a crime, when it is unjustified to be pulling out your gun, why are they getting let off with this? And
right.
And I heard, I think that I didn't hear. I think that it's it's like that brotherhood mentality. With the cops.
I get why that would extend to cops not wanting to out one of their own.
Yeah.
Or to offer testimony against them or anything like that. And that makes sense. I mean, I feel a certain solidarity with people that I've worked with and even in the trenches with them and dealing with the bullshit. And some of that comes along. I don't really get why that would extend to the courts, though. I mean, they're both government institutions, but...
Well, the unfortunate fact is a cop's testimony is worth more than a civilian's. So if you have...
Yeah, I don't really know if I could argue that.
Yeah. No. So if you have like two cops, I mean, even one, I mean, it's almost like the Middle Eastern thing with, or the Muslim thing with women, where a woman's testimony is worth half of a man's. So you need 3 women to testify against.
It's not codified in that way, though.
But it is very much that. And
it does seem to be present,
I do think too, and there's obviously a lot of social and economic reasons for this, but when you talk about and one of the points that I think Black Lives Matter has is when you talk about a black testimony. I think that is not codified, but I think people view that as less.
Okay, so this actually kind of stumbled on an interesting other thing. Mm-hmm. I'd be curious to hear what you have to think about it. But I constantly hear people talk about institutional racism, like emphasis on that word, institutional racism in the courts, institutional racism in hiring processes. And for like the latter, for example, they'll point to black sounding names get less callbacks when they put in resumes than white sounding names. And to at least in my understanding, an institution would be something that's codified, put in print, policy.
Yeah, it'd be a government
something
law.
like
Yeah.
that. I mean, it doesn't even necessarily have to go so far as a law, but it could be. Definitely, it could be a law. But to me, like that difference in callbacks for hiring indicates that there's some percentage that's high enough to sway national averages of individual, not institutional, but individual racist hiring managers.
Right.
I don't doubt for a fucking second that there are racist white dudes who, when they get, you know, a very black sounding name on an applicant from one of their applicants, just toss the resume aside.
Yeah.
Don't doubt that in the slightest. I also don't doubt that that happens with Hispanic people when they get white sounding names, or Japanese people when they get, you know, Mexican sounding names.
I think it's pretty universal.
I'm sure that there's racists within every, and it's going to be swung most in favor of whites because they happen to be the majority in the country. But to me, that seems to signify individual racism on a massive scale rather than actual institutional racism. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think if you're going exactly the definition of institutional racism, we don't have it. If you're talking about institutional racism as in going back to police, tend to arrest more black suspects for no reason. Or not no reason, but we'll get into that. I think that's where you can see a unofficial racism,
right? But
which would be perceived as institutional. Because I mean, it wasn't very long ago. I think it was California where they had the no-go zones for black people.
Right.
Where you were. I'm going to say Compton. I don't know if it was Compton, but let's say it was Compton. If you go to Compton, you try to go to the hills. The cops aren't going to necessarily arrest you, but they're going to harass you.
Had, during the civil rights movements, basically not necessarily official, but very heavily enforced.
Yeah, it was LA.
Where black people were not allowed in certain parts of LA.
Yeah,
for sure.
And that's in one of the most. Well, I guess Southern California is more conservative than Northern California, but
really,
yeah, I've heard that. But regardless, when you're talking about the whole country, you're talking about one of the most progressive states there is in the United States. You know, it's to have that in a place like that is pretty mind-boggling.
In the very not too distant past.
Yeah, in like 1960s. Yeah.
But I mean, okay, so you're talking about black guys getting arrested more often.
Mm-hmm. I think
they're not pointing to some, here's the police code that we just have to arrest a guy if he's
right.
You know, in a certain pigment range.
Well, that one was in the 60s, but recently I don't.
Right, I'm just taking it back to present day. But I am sure that there are individual police officers who use racism and who use racist-based profiling in, you know, the way that they arrest people.
Right.
For sure.
I think the argument that I probably poorly presented was these people are racist. They're part of the institution. Institutionalized racism. That's how it's perceived.
Right. I get how you could say that I'm kind of picking at semantics a little bit. But it still just does kind of bother me when I hear that, and then I say, well, what about, for example, affirmative action in hiring? That's an institution as well,
right? In
hiring and college admissions, but it's actually codified. It's actually written out somewhere that certain people need to be given certain preferential treatment based on their skin color.
Right.
That to me is a perfect example of something that is a codified institution. And when I try to raise that point, people tend to back off of that idea very quickly about like, no, that's just for the point of balancing things out. That has nothing to do with the institution. Yeah. And if they want to say that if there's enough individual old racist white dudes out there that don't call back black sounding names when they apply for their business, that's somehow an instance of an institutional racist stuff. And I feel like it just needs to be kind of on a level playing field. I mean, these things either are institutional or they aren't.
I don't think it's institutional.
AA or
the racism against black people. I don't think that. I can think of no law.
Not institutional in the literal sense of the term.
In the literal sense,
I take your correction that I'm being very nitpicky about that.
No, but I think can you call affirmative action institutionalized racism? man, I guess so. You know,
Again,
I guess
so. In a very literal sense, they have.
But the thing about affirmative action is, to my understanding of the law, is all things being equal. Like, so they have the same degree, right. and necessarily it would be of the same quality of school. You know, so because that's part of the equality thing of my understanding would be that would be part. Like, so if you have a dude that went to an Ivy League school and you have a guy that got a bachelor's at, you know, DeVry, you're going with the Ivy League, and that's justifiable, right?
Right.
My thing is with affirmative action is it's how many times are you actually going to have a candidate that is two candidates that are so equal that affirmative action is actually the only reason that one got hired over the other.
Well, perhaps you should do more homework, sir, because there's actually huge. I'm
sure there are
disparities in terms of just the credentials. You're talking SAT scores measured in the hundreds of points, preferential treatment.
They do get higher ones. Yeah,
you're talking about. Well, okay, but I mean, like if all you're saying all. You start off by saying like all else being equal. Well, it's not equal though. Is you're looking at you have two applicants. You have a white guy who has a certain SAT score and a certain GPA, and you have a black guy who has a SAT score and a GPA lower than that white guy. Sometimes, like I said, significantly.
Does it go that far?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, there's huge disparities in admissions policies.
Oh, then I was explained. It was explained to me wrong, I suppose. My understanding was all things being equal, they have to go with the black guy over the white guy. And my first thought was, how many times are you going to have two applicants that are totally equal?
My point is the applicants aren't equal.
Right.
They're letting in people who are objectively less qualified.
Right.
No, that's. I mean, that's one of the funny things in how that whole thing is kind of presented. I think a lot of times that people don't necessarily really delve into. Okay, well, like what's the actual statistical difference?
Yeah.
And the arguments for why that may be is they're trying to account for the fact that that black person is likely to have come from, more socioeconomically challenged background. It's like, okay, why don't you go with that? I would have no problem at all if you looked at an applicant and you said, wow, this guy grew up from the fucking streets and he didn't have a proper home. He went to the shittiest high school in the nation. He had no funding, shitty education, and he managed to come pretty damn close, but admittedly a little bit below one of our other applicants. And you look at that guy and say, that's an incredible individual.
I'd give that guy the job.
Yeah. Right, exactly, because he clearly got some balls of steel to be able to pull something like that off.
Well, not only that, but self-motivation, discipline.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not really that remarkable when some guy who's born with a silver spoon manages to land a high GPA or a good SAT score. It's like we had private tutors in every subject. That doesn't say much of your character as a person.
Yeah.
But they're making the racist assumption that black people must have come from more socioeconomically disadvantaged. And an interesting thing that's actually that's kind of backfired.
So wait. Did we just turn this around and say that affirmative action is institutionalized racism against black people? Snap, snap. I think in a way it is. I think in a way it is.
But they're making that assumption. But I guess just my issue with it is that it's race-based at all. If you want to look at people's backgrounds and if you want to look at their socioeconomic status, which sometimes does come into things, great. I'm all in favor of that.
Right.
One of the points I was getting to is that it's kind of ironic because the group that's actually harmed by affirmative action the most is Asians.
Right.
Because they tend to do disproportionately well, and they're better than whites academically, and they're the ones who are most often having their spots given up to blacks. Or when I say their spots, I mean spots that just purely looking at their credentials and their skin color, they would have had. And they're the ones who are actually suffering the most from it.
Yeah.
Then whites, and then black people and Hispanics are benefiting from it disproportionately.
Yeah.
And another funny thing is that it seems to be giving a huge boon to black people who do come from incredibly privileged backgrounds. Because there are black people who are sons of doctors and lawyers who have all of the same benefits that I just listed for the potential white candidate. And they're basically given a boost of hundreds of points in their already sterling SAT score and GPA and background of all this stuff, and they're getting in.
There's kind of 2 points I wanted to get into. That is one, my view of it is to have kind of pride in yourself and who you are as a person. A lot of that is from your own achievement that we all need help along the way for sure, but that the large part of the work was done by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the reasons why I think we both find our various forms of art that we enjoy doing, long form writing, that kind of thing, to be so satisfying, because when you are done with it, you have something to look back on and you go, I that was totally mine.
Yeah,
and somebody helped me with an idea and fleshed out ideas, and somebody read it, but that was my accomplishment.
You started with a blank page and you
Yeah.
ended up with a work of art.
Right.
Say. Yeah.
So in that sense, I've heard it was as ridiculous as it's an extra 100 points for writing your name correctly on the page if you're black, which is really, I would view that as insulting if somebody gave that to me. So well-intentioned for sure, but is it demeaning self-worth among?
I think it is. And
yeah.
that was, it's funny. I was actually just thinking about that, but I realized I've been ranting too long and I wanted to give you a shot.
Yeah. No, you're fine. We can both rant for as long as you want.
But no, I was just literally about to raise that point, is that then you have this interesting environment where if presumably people are aware of this, people on college campuses.
Yeah.
And you have reason to question if the black guy sitting next to you at Berkeley got in because he's smart or because he's black. But that black guy also has reasons to wonder
why he got in.
If he got in because he's smart or because he's black. And it seems like it's taking away some element of achievement. Again, if you want to base this on their actual lives and not their skin color, lovely. I would love to see more of that. There needs to be affirmative action in socioeconomic regards, not in race regards.
Well, I think real quick, anytime you talk about this kind of thing, there's the hint of racism that comes across. Just it's just that way. But wouldn't it be great to see, because black people are American citizens. They helped us build this country, and granted that wasn't fair the way that was achieved, but they're our neighbors, and wouldn't it be great to see them achieve on their own? Like, I'm not phrasing this well.
No, I get
to see them achieve a great academic, because they're capable. I mean, everybody's capable.
Yeah.
But when you throw that question into the mix, it just fucks things up, and
why the extra helping hand?
Yeah, why
just based on race?
I mean, sometimes
it seems patronizing.
Financial, though, I understand.
Right.
The extra financial hand, I totally get.
Because if somebody's able to overcome extreme adversity in terms of actual measurable things beyond just they're black, and we assume that black people have a harder time of things, even though one particular black guy could have had a wonderful magical life, and some other black guy could have been born into
when you take it in like a blanket statement, though, I think that is true. But I've always been a big thing of stereotypes are necessary for big blanket statements, right? To kind of get a rough idea. It's like a rule of thumb, a rough idea of what's going on.
Well, I would say stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. That's basically what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, once you get to that person-to-person basis, then you drop the stereotype.
You should.
Because you can't judge an individual on a stereotype.
I agree. Well, I mean, you can look at the stereotype. It's not even a stereotype. It's factually based that, average black family income in America is much lower than it is for whites.
Yeah.
So
but you can't assume that your
exactly.
black friend has a much lower income.
Until you know the guy, or until you've looked at his bank statements or whatever. Yeah. So that's where you take something that's statistically based, and then they're doing it in reverse. We want to say yes, stereotypes apply broadly, but if you're looking at something like admitting this particular individual to your college, you need to look at him, not actually another. Not saying of mine, but something I'm fond of saying is that statistics are made of individuals, but individuals are not made of statistics.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great way of putting it. Yeah,
and that's I don't remember where I originally heard that, but it's always stuck with me because it's funny how people tend to act like it's the other way around.
Yeah,
you can meet a black guy and just assume, well, he must have come from. That's what the universities are doing. He must have come from some disadvantaged background.
Well, that's the thing that I've noticed about among like super liberals. There was a person that I worked with. And I have a friend, Jamie, who's black. Actually, he's your friend too, I believe.
Yes.
So we have a friend named Jamie. And my coworker at that time was one of these super like liberals and blah, blah, blah. And, I was like, oh, man, talk about Jamie a little bit because we were going to hang out that weekend. And I jokingly referred to him like, he's my black friend, and she's like, oh, you shouldn't refer to him that, he had such a hard time, I'm sure, growing up, and she just went like, the amount of depth she went into, like hit all the stereotypes,
right,
like, single parent household, poor, you don't understand what it's like. I'm like, Jamie comes from a loving, wonderful family and is doing very well for himself because he's an intelligent guy.
Yeah.
Like, he can handle a joke of me calling him my black friend because, one, he is my friend and he is black.
Yeah.
And holy shit, lady. But it, as well intentioned as it was, they're going so far in one direction that they're embracing the stereotype of your run-of-the-mill.
Yeah, well, no, ironically, in their effort to try to combat racism, they've ended up being racist.
Yeah, which is where kind of Black Lives Matter is at this point, where they've gone full circle.
Trying to actually get it back to the.
Well, I think that's what this whole thing is. It's easy to come under the misconception that the United States is an inherently racist place. There's pockets of racism, and there's horrible places like the South that perhaps a lot of people don't want to go, and gay people had that till recently.
I'd be fine there. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'd be okay. Actually going to the South. Yeah. Anyway, for a quick little kip. But shit, what the fuck was I gonna say? There's the misconception of that the entire United States is this horrible racist place, and it's really not. And Black Lives Matter is trying to portray it as, holy shit, we're all dying out here. It's like, well, it's not that simple. You have an argument, but your argument is what you're saying. It's not what you're portraying it as.
Yeah. I agree. Well, and one of the other slogans that's really bothered me, that I've heard frequently in speaking on the militarization of the police force.
Oh, that's a huge factor. Yeah,
say that it's quote unquote open season on black people, which is that's a hunting term. Right?
Yeah, that's not good.
That's a hunting term.
Yeah,
that's also bullshit. And I would also posit that if it was open season on black people,
right,
police have more than enough firepower to be making a much larger dent than something that we measure in billions of a percent.
Oh, I'm sorry. You said Black Lives Matter, saying that's what the police are like.
That's what.
That's not what the police actually. That's not what. Like, there was no statement released by a police officer that said,
it's open season.
Okay.
No. It's not something that they've said about the way that the police interact with black people.
Okay.
It's quote unquote open season to shoot black people.
Yeah,
which again is a hunting term referring to like when it's appropriate to, or during certain times when you're allowed to go out and hunt deer or whatever because they have to protect populations. Yeah. So there's certain times. So you're saying we're living in a time where cops are hunting black people.
Yeah.
And they have military grade weapons to be able to do so, and they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think that they need them because if you've seen some of the riots, ironically, some of the ones that were kicked off by Black Lives Matter, you kind of need some firepower, and you need tear gas, and you need.
I think they're using rubber bullets a lot of the time.
They are, like, yeah. But I mean, but like people will say like, well, that brand of tear gas is the same that's used by the military.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean,
seems like it's necessary sometimes. Have you seen the shit the police have to put up with occasionally?
Well, I wouldn't even say rightly or wrongly if it is. The police buy military surplus all the time, so the tear gas they have to use at their disposal immediately, whether it's a white neighborhood or a black neighborhood, is probably going to be military grade tear gas.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. I don't think the police should have military grade tear gas.
Why?
Personally, maybe a small stockpile in the extreme sense, but not to have it readily available. Why do the police need tanks?
How many police forces do you know that actually have tanks, though?
Okay, good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
I'm sure
maybe
that
one
there's
per,
so
maybe like one or two that actually like need it, like LA cops. Okay, you might need tanks because
but even so I mean they have a military grade shotgun as opposed to a regular shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you want to go something as far as lethal as looking at the types of guns that they have.
Yeah.
Again, what's really the difference? It's going to shoot a piece of metal.
Oh, I
it's
see
going to put holes in you.
Yeah.
The tear gas, regardless of military grade, its purpose is to.
Well, it's going to be stronger, but it's not lethal.
It's going to be stronger, maybe a bigger cloud or something like that. But Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
if it's needed to do the job, I mean, this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's funny that people always want to crack down. You always hear about AR-15s, and we need to get down on assault weapons, and I love how people will characterize military grade weapons when they don't know what the fuck that even means.
Well, it's a certain.
But most police, or, sorry, most mass shootings are actually carried out with handguns.
Right.
And everyone's like, no, we don't want to touch. We think it's fine if you want to keep a hunting rifle or a handgun or something like that. When that's actually the problem. It's not people coming out with military grade weapons most of the time. Ironically, I'm saying that, but the same thing. Yeah, if you have a tool that can put a piece of metal from this point through you at a certain distance away, do you really care if it's military grade or not?
Well, I think
if you have a gas canister that's going to make you cough and be unable to see, do you really care if it's military grade or not?
Right. Well, I think with ammunition, the concern about military grade would be with like armor piercing shit, which obviously wouldn't come into a factor with your average person in a riot.
Yeah, cops using armor piercing or hollow point or anything.
What I want to say was with I don't think cops should be buying military surplus. Really came out of the fact that I think the militarization of the cops, which started with the Reagan administration, is not the direction that we need to put our police force in. Because that's why you get shootings. It's an us versus them mentality. And, you're not in a war zone.
Again,
you're in a civilian area.
In my head, but in a slightly different tract. I actually think that if the counterpoint to Black Lives Matter has been made, that if Black Lives Matter really gives a shit about Black lives, it should be focusing on violence within the Black community. Because if you want to look at the 3 times more likely to get shot by a cop statistic, you're like way the fuck more likely to get shot by a civilian black dude.
But Chad, that one's hard to solve and put into a catchy slogan.
Right. But my main point is that if you want to actually solve that problem, and for that matter, problems of police brutality, cooperation and cohesion with police should actually be a priority.
Well, that's the thing well, when you saw, again, I think this cop was undertrained and probably not equipped mentally or physically to deal with the situation, which he was not presented with, assumingly. After he shot him, did you see the post video? Like the post, like when he was talking about him shooting the guy?
No, I actually, so I just saw that.
It was not something he wanted to do. Like, he didn't enjoy it.
No.
He clearly was questioning himself, questioning his judgment. Sounded like he was on the verge of going completely hysterical. And if it was a kind of calculated murder, it would have been, I killed him. Like, he did this, I pulled my gun, I shot him in the head.
Yeah.
It wasn't that. He was clearly just like questioning himself and really, really fucked up about it. He sounded like a little bitch because I mean that in that he sounded like he was just realizing that he was not prepared to be a police officer, mentally.
Yeah.
And should probably not have been, or should not have applied for the job.
How many people really are, though? How many people are really in that?
I don't think really anybody is. But I think people handle it better. Certain people handle it better.
Definitely. But, I mean, people like to kind of... So the counter-argument to, well, police have really tough jobs and they have to make snap decisions and stuff is saying, well, but they're government officials. They're given essentially the license to kill in certain situations. And they need to be held to a higher standard. And while I don't necessarily think that's true,
they need to be held to the same standard of a person. They can't be getting let off for murder. Can you imagine if you shot somebody and you said, I feared for my life, and they go, why? Why did you fear for your life? Well, he said he had a gun. I don't think it would play out the same for you. Did you see the gun? No, I didn't see the gun. He didn't seem to be pulling for the gun,
Again, you'll have to interject that video so we can. It'll be interesting to see how
you don't see that
plays out in terms of our
you don't see that in the
video.
Yeah. You don't see any of that in the video, but.
I mean, okay. So if a cop tells me not to reach for something, if he tells me not to reach for a gun, I'm not gonna reach for my registration, hoping he's not. I just detailed the way that I deal with traffic stops.
But think about this too. if you're told to get your ID and your gun is, like, to you, you know where your gun is.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, I'm not fucking reaching for my gun. I'm reaching for my ID, which he asked me for. You know, that's a totally, like... I understand the cop's perspective now, saying, you know, when you say that, like, you're like, okay, well, the cop didn't know where the gun was, and he was told there was a gun. But again, how many people that are going to shoot a cop are going to tell them that they have a gun? Maybe one or two every 200 years. You know, it's not going to be very many. The other thing, too, is we have a video that we can watch and replay. And that does need to be said. Split moment decision, you don't know what decision you're going to make until you're in that situation. But I don't think that that cop was really prepared to be doing what he was doing. Mentally, I mean. He was, yeah.
I'm just kind of wondering to what degree we have to chalk this kind of stuff up to a workplace mistake.
I was going to go into that a little bit, yeah.
I mean,
you know.
It's a weird conversation to have because when you or I fuck up at our jobs,
nobody dies.
Nobody dies.
But when somebody else fucks up, yeah. It's the same thing the military has,
up, somebody does
yeah.
die. So at what point do you say, well, when you make that mistake, we need to prosecute you as a murderer? Or do you say, well, we sent you out to fight crime with a gun. Occasionally one of those bullets is not going to land where it's supposed to land. I mean, I don't really have an answer to that at all. It's just an interesting point to kind of, it's an interesting thought experiment is, I mean, do you want to trump somebody up on murder charges? And an interesting parallel actually might be as part of the reason why healthcare is so expensive is because of essentially lawsuit prevention, because those are also people who are put in in a position where their mistakes can cause life and death.
It's a huge factor. Like, you definitely have to take it into account to where, if you're an office worker and you fuck up some paperwork, you might have a bad day. You might be fired. Nobody's dying. Right. Unless you're, like, doing medical billing or something like that, and somebody didn't get the money for the treatment they needed. But, you know, I mean, these things are going to happen and they're going to be unjustified. But it is going to be like I said, he was clearly fucked up over it. He wasn't happy that he did it. You know, he didn't give anybody high fives. He sounded pretty hysterical. I
don't think we can necessarily take his. I appreciate his contrition over what he did.
Yeah,
but I don't
it's not. Yes, it's not. It could be a show
we can look
for sure.
At it
yeah,
and say, even if it's not fake, I don't think we can necessarily look at it and say, oh well, therefore he shouldn't be charged with murder. But I'm wondering if part of the reason why cops are let off of these kind of things has less to do with racism and more to do with the fact that
it's definitely a factor.
They're given guns.
Yeah.
And told to go out and fight crime.
Yeah.
And like with everyone, sometimes mistakes are going to happen, and it doesn't necessarily seem fair in a way to prosecute their mistakes as murder. I mean, I guess at best maybe manslaughter.
Yeah.
But again, that implies an element of mistake. You know, that's you accidentally clip a bicyclist while driving is a lot different than
I think
open season posting up on a fucking tower and sniping black people from, you know,
right.
Like,
yeah,
it's kind of two different, like.
I think if you have like if you had more cases where it was, or if this was the case, right? If this was the case, and you didn't have the guy selling loose cigarettes who should not have died, and that was not a mistake, that was deliberate. If you had cases like this, you'd have something to talk about, but it wouldn't be inherent racism. It would be, why are cops feeling like they need to shoot people? You know, why are they immediately assuming that their life isn't in danger? And what can we do to correct that? You know, it would be more of a workplace mistake talk rather than look at all these cases where these guys were killed for no reason. And now these might legitimately be workplace mistakes. But
excellent point. And another point that I think I first heard from Ben Shapiro. I know you're not a fan of.
I lost that guy when he started talking about climate change. I'm like, dude, how much of a Republican can you be?
But again, I feel like he does stick that whatever. We can talk about Ben Shapiro for
we should do a podcast on climate change.
I think there'd be just too much
agreement,
echo chamber, circle jerking there.
Hey, wait! Anita Sarkeesian has made a lot of money off of a big circle jerk echo chamber. So
yeah, we were trying to make bank.
Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
You're talking about so is it this huge intrinsic problems of every police force being super racist and just hunting down black people open season style with their militarized weapons, or is this actually a very rare workplace mistake that has been trumped up, which I hate that we can't use that term anymore, to the point of...
I don't know why we can't.
Because who did you just think of when I said that?
I didn't think of it until you said we can't say that anymore.
All right, well,
which would actually be like, I didn't think this was racist until you told me it was.
All right, anyways, main point was you can probably list off the names of almost every instance that has caused national controversy when a white cop when somebody shot a black guy, and some percentage of those were actually justified. The fact that you or I, being vaguely interested in this kind of stuff, can rattle off a list of a dozen names. Yeah. We all know their names. We know who they are. Like in a country of 300 million people, you can narrow down to a dozen the significant number that have just caused controversy. Yeah. And some of those, like Michael Brown, were actually perfectly justified. That indicates that this is actually a vanishingly small problem.
Well, I don't know about vanishing.
I really think it is, though, man.
Well, I can't remember the guys.
You want to look at auto accident deaths or something and compare, like really how many people are dying from individual problems? Is this really as big of a deal as it's being made out to be?
Yeah. Yeah, it's...
If you can count on both hands the number of unjustified police shootings that have happened in our lifetimes, of black people specifically, and you still have to... Sorry, if you can count on both hands the number of police shootings of black guys that cause controversy, you have to take a few off for the fact that some of them are unjustified. You're going to have to take a few more off for the fact that some of them had nothing to do with race.
Right.
Right? And were just, as you said, the result of bad police training or just police making a mistake, reacting badly, that race didn't play a factor. You're left with a pretty fucking small list. Yeah. All in all. So does a movement like Black Lives Matter even need to exist? If what they're really fighting for, what they're flipping cars over and burning down businesses for, is like 5 dudes. Yeah. You know?
Well, I think it's more than it's more than 5, but
I'm sticking with my hand metaphor here, bro. I think it probably goes as high as like maybe 20.
You usually do stick with
in the last few decades.
So
20 tops.
That kind of brings up the point too, because the first thing that anybody says when you get in conversation like this is, well, socioeconomic reasons, and but here's the thing.
Rant on that.
Right, but here's the thing.
After you're done.
Black Lives Matter. What better thing could they be doing than do the police stuff, please. Raise awareness, because it does raise awareness for a huge problem. Whether that problem is with just race or with just cops is left to debate, but we need to know when a cop shoots somebody, right? Because again, we need to hold them to a standard. But why aren't they trying to bring up, to my knowledge at least, why aren't they trying to bring up black communities? Why aren't they trying to...
The kind of arguments out that I've had when I've gotten debates with these people is that there are separate organizations. And I feel like that's actually a fair point to make, because we talked about this actually a little bit. I think it might have been in our last video. That dedicating yourself to the smaller problems isn't necessarily wrong. It's the not as bad as fallacy, right? You can't say something doesn't matter just because there are things that are worse.
Well, no, I'm not saying one or the other is worse than the other. I'm just saying, like...
Well, it is, though. I mean, black on black shootings are a much bigger problem than white cop on black shootings. Okay. Right, but...
Well, also, the cop that just shot that guy, I believe he wasn't white.
It was also hilarious. You end up with cases like George Zimmerman.
Well, the only reason it's hilarious is because they try to say it's a white cop, and then it comes out that it's not.
Right, yeah. No, but if you remember George Zimmerman shot a black guy, again, seems fairly justified in the situation that he did it.
Well, if you have a guy on top of you
that.
smashing your head into the pavement and you have a gun.
Yeah, I would probably shoot him.
Yeah.
But it was funny that I know if George Zimmerman had funded an institution to help kids from inner city schools get better education, the media would have portrayed him as Hispanic. But if he shot a black guy, he's the white Hispanic.
Yeah.
He's the only white Hispanic out there. I mean, technically all Hispanics are white in some kind of sense.
Doesn't that kind of go both ways a little bit?
But what do you mean?
Well, I remember, Wanda Sykes. Way back, she made a joke about Tiger Woods. And he's a white-black golfer when he's doing well, but man, when he gets in trouble, what are they going to say? Black golfer, you know.
I'm actually on a slightly separate side tangent. I'm curious to see what happens when, because Obama's purported to be our first black president.
Yeah.
At some point, we're going to elect a guy who's not half white. And I'm curious to see what happens then.
I feel like I've heard that, yeah.
Are they going to say Obama's, or are they going to say this is the first really black president?
Yeah.
I'm interested because it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
We're going to get a guy who's full 100% black.
Yeah.
Not a 50-50 split. I don't know why it errs on the side. Again, like I'm saying, if it's some kind of commendable accomplishment, they seem to want to favor the minority side.
Right.
If it's some kind of atrocity, they seem to want to favor the white side.
I just think there's just way too much concentration on race in general.
In general,
like, why are we... You know, that's the other thing about Black Lives Matter is why are we reducing people to the thing they can't control? I cannot help that I was born from 2 Caucasian parents.
Pasty motherfucker. Huh?
Yeah, just like you can't help that you were born from 1 Asian and 1 white parent.
That's not true.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, couldn't help if it was.
I don't know what the fuck you're getting at with that.
No, I'm saying, like, why are we reducing people to the thing they can't do, like, cannot control?
Well, because their argument is that all of these things are racially motivated, but it's not, and that segues into the other point that I was going to make about you had just briefly mentioned that it's due for like socioeconomic reasons, and sometimes people will like to point to that, or like, oh, well, you know, you can try to explain away that 3 times higher shooting difference by saying, well, black people commit more crimes, they tend to live in impoverished neighborhoods where crimes are prevalent. Crime, as somebody who's lived in extreme poverty and has also been a criminal, I will not say is their only recourse, but becomes a more viable recourse to try to actually earn money. And therefore, you know, you can't try to explain away the 3 times higher because of socioeconomic reasons. My counter to that is, what the fuck does that matter to your average beat cop? Again, in the case of Michael Brown, was he supposed to, when Michael Brown's trying to take his gun, is he supposed to say, well, Michael Brown likely comes from a socioeconomically, you know, underprivileged background. He doesn't have all the privilege and opportunities that a white person might have. So I really should just let him have my gun. Like, no, that's fucking ridiculous. I agree that there's huge issues of socioeconomic indifference, inequality that need to be addressed within the black community, but that is not the job of individual beat.
Right, but what I would say is, if you're a cop and you're rolling into a poor neighborhood, you're going to be on your guard more. So I think in that sense, it changes the mental outlook of the cop, and they are more likely, perhaps, to pull their gun in that neighborhood.
Sorry, though, for a good reason. I mean,
right,
and you
there is a reason for it.
The reasons are unfair, and you can want to tackle those reasons. And if you do, I'm in support. Where can I sign up? But it shouldn't matter to the individual cop. That's a realistic assessment of the situation that he's in. If he's rolling into a poor neighborhood, there are likely to be people dealing crack on the streets with guns that are illicitly obtained and shoved in their waistband. That's just a reality of things, and it's not his job to try to account for those differences of equality.
Yeah, it's not the inherent racism of the cop that he's rolling into an area that is...
Or that he's sent to those areas more often.
Or the sense is,
I mean,
you know,
The IRS is probably more preoccupied with dealing tax evasion in white communities. I don't know that at all.
Right.
But my point is, like, there's a difference. There's a difference between white collar and blue collar type crimes, and you can say it's unfair, but it's not a bad move to have more beat cops patrolling in shittier areas, which happen to be black, because that's where more crime that they're tasked with dealing with takes place.
Right.
And I think that you can kind of explain away the 3 times higher shooting disparity by saying that that's you would kind of expect to see that if there's higher rates of crime within the black community because of higher rates of poverty.
But the reason you cannot say that is because you're saying there's higher rates of crime in the black community. That's what I'm saying is that's where the conversation stops. When you have this conversation with anybody who is maybe not like as not to toot our own horn, but like open-minded and wanted to have a conversation. When you say, "Well, there's more crime in the black community," they go, "Fuck you, you racist."
Well, it's because they're assuming that in your mind you're saying it's something inherent to being black, and it's not.
It's not.
I've already admitted that it's due to other unfairness and other lack of privilege and historical obstacles that need to all be tackled, but not by beat cops. It's not their job.
Well,
it's the job of politicians and legislators and us as the people to be voting in an appropriate fashion, and we need to tackle that difference. But it doesn't. It should not matter to the black cop, or sorry, to the cop, if the black guy that he's accosting is socioeconomically disadvantaged.
It probably doesn't really enter into his head. Yeah.
It shouldn't though. I'm not saying it should at all.
And also anybody can fall under those circumstances too, because I've been poor.
I've been homeless.
You've been homeless. I've been super poor, and I'm sure it crossed both of our minds at some point. Like, I could just sell some weed, and I could eat tonight. You know,
I actually did. I stole shit. I'm not going to mention some of my more specific crimes that I've done.
Right.
But they were a choice on my part. I was poor, and it seemed like an easier way than trying to just stick with the shitty job that I've had, and I've sold drugs and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's not divided purely on race lines. And if a beat cop came up to me doing those kind of things, I chose to be a criminal. So did Michael Brown. But one final point that I did want to bring up, and we're going to wrap after this, was that it's kind of a curious phenomenon that you'll notice in a lot of movements that stand for the minority, and Black Lives Matter is no exception, that they ally with other minority causes that have nothing to do with what their aims are, just on the basis that they're also minorities. If you go onto the Black Lives Matter webpage, you'll find random little segments like under their, like, here's the issues that we're tackling. It's like police brutality against black people, over incarceration against black people, harsher sentencing against black people, trans issues, and it's like, wait a minute, like one of those is different than the other, you know? And it just it's weird to me that movements tend to show solidarity with other movements just on the basis that they're minorities. And the fucking craziest example of this that I've ever seen is LGBTQ plus other letters. I
think you just put a plus on the end. You're good.
It's hilarious that you have to.
I know,
it's like,
right?
How many fucking different words do you?
Well,
I'm starting to respect people who just stop with a T more often. Anyways, allying with Muslims as two fellow oppressed minorities, and it's funny because it seems to be openly accepted that LGBTQ plus is allowed to be in contention with Christianity because Christianity, on the surface of it, doesn't like homosexuals.
Yeah.
Islam, in writing, doesn't like them anymore, and in practice, dislikes them quite a bit more.
Well, they kill them.
I haven't seen any Christian. I can't remember the last time that I looked out on the horizon and saw a gay person hanging from a crane in this anywhere that I live in America.
Yeah.
Or anywhere I've been in America, and I don't remember that ever happening. So it's kind of hilarious to show solidarity just on the basis that they're also a minority, when in fact what they believe and what they are is either has nothing to do, like trans and BLM, or is actively opposed to what you are. I mean, that's got to be one of the most suicidal things you could probably support if you're a gay person is Islam.
Right, and I mean, to add to that point, ISIS had a magazine that they published for a while.
Oh, what was that called?
I can't remember. It's like some
It's funny to have like a weekly pamphlet.
They still do, but they have one.
Organized. Oh yeah, they still
They have one that isn't like around anymore or got shut down or something. But they had like a letter in the beginning, which was like, we're not killing you because you attacked us or the Crusades, or they went in detail. Like, we kill you because you're not a Muslim, for one. Two, gays, all this. It's just like, what, why are you allying with these people? I know ISIS is an extreme example but it is in their text where
you could argue it's a fundamental.
It's
a
fundamental example of what they're against. I mean, and Christianity's no better. Christianity does say that gays should be killed.
But I do feel like there's a difference in the theory, right? Theory versus practice. In
Right.
theory, they both are about equally opposed to homosexuals.
Right.
In practice, Islam far more so.
But that's because Christianity had its reform. Islam has not had its reform.
You can point to whatever reason. It doesn't make it any less suicidal to... I mean, it just strikes me as kind of funny that you'd want to...
Ally with a group of people that want to kill you. Yeah.
To be willing to fight an organization that wants to say that you shouldn't be allowed to get married,
right?
But ally with an organization that is hanging you from cranes in countries where it calls the shot.
Yeah,
and it's kind of funny. So just to kind of draw that back, something that struck me very curious about the BLM page was that they're showing all of this solidarity with other minority groups for no particular reason, and you'll see this at rallies too. For BLM, for example, where they'll talk about stuff. Yeah, I mean, over policing of black people and this and this and this having to do with black people, and gay people.
Yeah.
And Muslims, and literally list any other minority group that you could want, and for some reason they show solidarity, and I just, to kind of try to draw it to a close, I just wonder what that's speaking to, and we've questioned whether a movement like BLM even needs to exist. To what extent is it really fighting any kind of real issues with any kind of real, tangible, desirable outcomes, and to what extent is it just kind of social justice run amok?
Yeah.
That they feel the need to label their organization Black Lives Matter, as if that's an idea that's in contention.
Yeah, I can't think of any time I thought that Black lives didn't matter. I mean, they are, like I said.
Not even you. I mean, I feel like you'd have to get down to the most virulent, racist Nazi fucks in this country. You
got to go to West Virginia.
No,
sure.
Even then, you could end up with some dudes who you might not call back a black-sounding name with a resume application. If you were to ask him if we should be open season just murdering black people in the streets, I feel like he would offer a pretty strong no, more often than not. Like, what small percentage of society are they really trying to address? It's certainly not police officers. If police officers wanted to be killing black people, they could be doing a much more effective job of it than they are currently. That's not.
It's a harsh statement, but it is very true. It's if there was an open season,
with that, even without military grade hardware, they could be. There'd be a lot more black people dying left and right.
But I do think one of the things that Black Lives Matter has done and done very well, and credits due where credits due, is.
Oh, is that how we're gonna wrap this, really?
Well, no, I think this is important. is bringing up. We now have a sense of how often police shootings are, and that's an issue that we can directly tackle. So if they'd done nothing else but raise awareness about that, whether it was through black people or white people, we now know both sides of that, as you brought up the stats earlier. That's a great thing. And we can, or not we, but, the nation can work to address that. So they've done something very well. Now, their methods I don't agree with, but they did do that.
I hate to end on a point of disagreement, but
go ahead.
I don't feel like they're addressing an issue that's really that problematic. I mean, it's just not that prevalent.
Well, no,
it's really not.
Yeah, at least we know what it is, though.
Worth tackling, and the fact that they need to kind of tag on all of these other minority issues that have nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
To try to gain more solidarity for their movement, I think kind of speaks to that.
Well, Chad, I think that's your white privilege showing.
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, we should do one on that. But all right, so I guess that wraps it up for now. And I think next week we will be in a little town I like to call Londinius.
Sounds like a blast.
Yeah.
And it's been a pleasure, folks. Thanks for
right.
listening.
Take care, guys. We'll see you next time.